we're solving this problem using Gaussian elimination or using row operations to get this into row echelon form. So here's our system of three equations and three unknowns. Notice how they're all written, variables in alphabetical order with the constants on the right. That's important. We begin by putting it into an augmented matrix. Then we begin trying to get a diagonal of ones with everything else zeros, and when we do that, these will be our solutions for x, y, and z right here. So even there's flexibility in how to go through this, and so it makes it kind of your own individualized puzzle. But in general, you want to start here, get this one, then work on getting these zeros, then work on getting that one. And quite often you can't get that zero until after you've gotten that one. So usually one, and then work on getting these zeros, and then work on getting that one, and then work on getting that zero, and then work on getting that one, then that zero, and then last these zeros. So it's kind of like you're working in a counterclockwise direction. Here's the notation over here that we use to leave a trail of what we've done in each step. So in order to get our first one right here, what we've done is multiplied by 1/2. That's one of our rules. We can multiply by any number, non-zero number. So to get a new row 1, we've taken the old row 1 and multiplied by 1/2. So half of each of these numbers results in 1103. Okay, next we want to get a 0 here and here. So to do that, I begin by multiplying this row by a negative temporarily, -1, and adding it to that row. So I've notated that here. So row 1 times a -1 plus row 2. So -1 plus 1 is 0, -1 plus 1 is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1, and -3 plus 1 is -2. Then we do the same thing, but this time we multiply the top row by a -3 and add it to the next row. So -3 times 1 is -3 plus 3 is 0, -3 times 1 is -3 plus 4 is 1, -3 times 0 is 0 plus -1 is -1, -3 times 3 is -9 plus 13 is a +4. Okay, now the next thing we would want to do is again multiply by a fraction to take whatever number is right there and turn it into 1. Frequently that's what we would do, but in this case we have a 0 there. So it's kind of tricky to turn a 0 into a 1. However, we might notice that this row here, we're going to want a 0 there eventually. So if we were to just take and trade those two rows, we would have the 1 where we want it and the 0 where we want it. That's not always going to happen, but when it does, please take the opportunity. So here's what I've done here is simply traded row 2 and row 3. This is where we left off in the last video, so I kind of went through that quickly. If you have questions on what I did, go back to the last video to see more carefully. Okay. Next step is to get a 0 here. So to do that, we would want to figure out what we can do to this row to add it to that row to turn that into a 0, especially if this were another number besides a -1. Say there were a 7 here. We would want to multiply this row by a -7 and add it to that 7 to get it to turn into 0. In this case, however, it's simple to just add this row to that one and we will have our 0 exactly where we want it. So our new row 2 is going to be formed by taking row 2 and adding row 3 to it. So that will result in row 1 staying the same. And now we go 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus -1 is 0, and -2 plus 4 is 2. And then our last row will just stay like it is. That means we only have one thing left to do because typically we would work on getting that 0 next, but there's already a 0 there. So now we just want to get rid of that 1. So to do that, we're going to take row 2 and multiply it by a -1 so that when we add it to row 1, it cancels that 0, or that 1. So we're going to take, again, what I just said is we're going to take and create a new row 1 by multiplying row 2 by a negative and adding it to row 1. Alright, we're almost done here. I'm just going to move my work to this point. Oh, and I shouldn't have written the row 1 down. I got in the habit of doing that. Okay, back to here. So, -1 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. -1 times 1 is -1 plus 1 is actually 0. -1 times 0 is 0 plus 0 is 0. and negative 1 times 2 is negative 2 plus 3 is a positive 1. Okay, so a little bit messy, but I think we've got it. Now I'm just going to copy down our other rows as is. Now, in order to start this problem in the first place, we began with 3 equations, which we then turned into an augmented matrix that looked like this. Now we're going to go backwards. We take an augmented matrix and we turn it into 3 equations. So this is our x column, this is our y column, this is our z column. So this would mean 1x plus 0y plus 0z equals 1. Doesn't that essentially mean that x equals 1? This would be 0x plus 1y plus 0z equals 2. So essentially that means y equals 2. This would be 0x plus 0y plus 1z equals negative 2. So z equals negative 2. So by getting this into row echelon form, we have found our solutions.